that make it necessary to keep everything very simple. And people in China, like here, have a strong interest in yoga and meditation. And people all over the world have an interest in how to deal with their negative emotions and how to overcome negative emotions. It's universal because it's the nature of the place where we live. Dukkhalayam ashashvatam, in the language of Bhagavad Gita. It's a place where there's suffering. There's other than suffering, but the other than suffering is short, as well as the suffering is also short. Everything is of short duration. So that's a clue or a key how to overcome negative emotions, is to connect to a place of consciousness that's beyond short, or even beyond long, something that's eternal. By connecting with the eternal, that's meditation, then you make that connection and it becomes the principle of overcoming negative emotions by experiencing a higher happiness. That's another verse, verse from Bhagavad Gita. Param drishtva nivartate. By experiencing a higher taste, one can go beyond the disturbances of the temporary. So, overcoming negative emotions. It was part, when presented in China, it was part of a 4-part seminar, because one of the parts was actually the mantra meditation itself, but this was the introduction. Understanding negative emotions and the role of mantra meditation to assist in the effort to overcome them. That's the starting point. So here's a photograph of young man, checked the weather report, looked good, decided to go for a walk on the weekend and on the boardwalk. And when he got there, sure enough, it rained. And somehow there was a vendor of umbrellas, so he got an umbrella and he's doing his walk on the boardwalk when some unexpected circumstance happened. And life has that. Challenges that we don't plan them to happen, but nonetheless they happen. Sometimes financial challenges, sometimes relationship challenges, occupation, physical, social, cultural, and beyond, like wars and things like that. And when those unexpected challenges arise, sometimes they seem very formidable. Like those challenges, those circumstances are just going to whip you. And when you start feeling those feelings, that the challenges are wearing you out, then that's where that triggers the negative emotions. And negative emotions, by their very nature, they're disempowering. And so much degree that the emotion itself is like being in a prison, and you feel you can't get out of the circumstance, nor can you get out of the emotion connected to the circumstance, and it's miserable. It's self-disempowering. Those people who study this as a profession and help others who are feeling a little overwhelmed by those negative emotions, here's one. Depression is a prison where you are both the suffering prisoner and the cruel jailer. Depression and clinical depression and all of those types of terminologies, it's an industry in the medical field largest and most financially invested in medications and methodologies for, and over time. We'll see some charts. Growing phenomena. The range of negative emotions. There's a little cute illustration showing some of them. We'll see some other images. The point is that something everyone experiences. Just as there's happiness, there's also distress. That's the nature of the place. It's a place of duality. Wherever there's this, there's that. Just like winter and summer season, or day and night, or hot and cold, or pleasure and pain, and honor and dishonor, and it's spoken of in Bhagavad Gita. It says where this is a place of duality, and there's going to be negative emotions. So it's something that happens to everybody, and something we should be prepared or equipped to deal with. Sometimes it expresses itself as hopelessness, sometimes as loneliness. When I was putting this together, I was a little surprised to find out in the UK, there's a ministry of loneliness. And my understanding is it became a ministry, a nationwide ministry, because there was so much financial expenditure in the country dealing with loneliness. There's songs written about it. All the lonely people, from where have they come? So it's part of their national budget, is the ministry of loneliness, and how to help people with that emotion. You may know some people that have an anger problem. I know some people that have an anger problem. And when anger kicks in, they don't have control anymore. Negative emotions have a way of just taking the front seat, driver's seat. And what do you do when that happens to someone dear to you, or who knows, it may happen to you? Another kind of negative emotion that's I've seen, self-sabotage. We'll see this slide again as we move forward. But people, if there isn't a circumstance that's difficult, they create one. Like going out on a limb and sawing the limb while they're sitting on the edge of the limb to see what's going to happen. And then when it happens, or as they hear the cracking sound, then they scream. But, they've done it to themselves. We'll see some examples. Or anxiety. And when those negative emotions come, then something that doesn't help those negative emotions at all is another negative emotion. Resentment or blaming someone or a circumstance or something like that. It's another negative emotion that's part of the trap. Here's a little chart. As you see at the bottom, Dr. Hawkins made studies over some period of time, published them. Anatomy of consciousness, he called it. So there's lower emotions at the bottom and higher emotions at the top. And as consciousness rises, then the emotions get lighter and brighter, and the consciousness gets lower, then it's darker and more prevalent. It takes over. Look on the left side, you see shame and guilt. It's way at the bottom. And I'm a little surprised, but it's stronger and darker even than anger. And in short, studies show that meditation helps reduce the lower consciousness emotions and increase the higher consciousness emotions. It helps to increase consciousness. And then way at the very top, I don't know how they measure enlightenment, but that's what he has on his left chart. Gratitude is way up there, even above peace, joy, and love. That's pretty nice too. So the purpose of showing this chart is meditation by studies have an effect of increasing, lifting consciousness. One study I know was done at the University of Pennsylvania in Philadelphia. And there was a man who, a professor, who wanted to see if there's some way that science can measure the effect of meditation. And he was a meditator. So he requested a friend of his who was a certain field of medicine, I forget the name, neurologist maybe. He had no, it wasn't neurologist. Anyway, he had an experiment was conducted where there was a little meditation room, and it was set up in such a way that when the person who was doing his meditation could just gently wiggle his finger, and his finger was tied to a string, and the string was moving, was an indicator to the person who was the scientist, who then released some fluids intravenously into his vein to allow a picture to be taken where that fluid went to. What's it called? What's that field of science called? Field of medicine called? Huh?
Is it neurology? Is it neurology?
Maybe. Maybe.
Radiology.
Radiology. Thank you. Radiology. So then they whisk the meditator off to a way to examine where the radioactive fluids went, and there was a really bright area in the back of the head. The area of the brain that deals with motor skills and those things is in the front side, and the awareness and contemplation side is in the back. So this was lit up like a Christmas tree, and the front was very silent. So they did that experiment with different types of meditation. They brought in some Buddhist monks. They brought in some ladies who were part of a monastery, a nunnery, and the principle worked universally. By the process that brought about a contemplative, meditative state, awareness became stronger. And as awareness or consciousness becomes stronger, positive emotions are more abundant and the negative emotions are less. They're diminished. So meditation is a good deterrent for negative emotions. That's what that chart says. And we all know there's positive emotions. We all know the feeling when you do an act of kindness for somebody, you feel something. We all know that feeling. It's a nice feeling. Mode of goodness feeling. It's described in Bhagavad Gita. Happiness in the mode of goodness. Or it may go beyond happiness, it can become joy. Or when the circumstances require you stick to honesty no matter what the circumstance is. And you just believe in sticking by the truth, abiding by the truth. And there's a certain happiness that comes from that. Or the happiness of rendering some service to others. The happiness of letting go of those negative feelings and extending forgiveness. Or the positive emotion we saw in the chart already is a peaceful state, contentment, inner peace. So we like the good ones, and we don't like the bad ones. How do the bad ones get in there? From where do they arise? Now we'll go to what people who are, it's their profession to deal with this thing. They say the figure of a person sitting at a desk and a computer. So like a computer has hardware, software, and an operator. So there's physical, mental, and spiritual layers of well-being, the sense of well-being. Now, in the hardware side, or the physical side, there's far more comforts and things that should make life happier. Should make life happier. Compared to previous times, generally speaking, there's more abundance of material facilities, well-developed material facilities, hardware improvements. However, even we have more comforts and conveniences, modern life leads to more clinical depression. Here's a chart showing mental disorders going from 1968 to 2010. The chart's going up pretty steeply, isn't it? This is clinical mental disorder, not just somebody that says, I'm feeling sad because. And these are reported cases. So it's a big problem, a growing problem. And some of the people who study this consider their language is virus, just like COVID is a virus. So they say the world has caught a virus. And here's some picture. Anxiety disorders are the most common mental illness in the U.S., affecting 40 million adults in the United States, adults 18 and older. And that's 18% of the population. Each year, 1 out of 5 people report anxiety disorder. That's the ones that report it. That's a big percentage. That's a big percentage. This is a World Health Organization figure, well-known figure. 300 million people around the world have depression. And China doesn't like to say bad stuff happens in China, but it's one of the things that they have published. Employees at 50 of China's top companies in 30 different cities, 78.9% showed signs of agitation. That's not such a surprising figure. 59% reported anxiety, and 38% haunted by depression. Now, this figure about China is there because I first presented it in China. And it was part of a 2-day gathering, like a little seminar or retreat on mantra meditation. And at the end of the first day, the person who was organizing this privately informed me that the corporate company that they work for, on that Saturday evening, one of the corporate executives jumped out of the 7-story building and splattered on the sidewalk. And immediately the company ordered that all of their executives must take part in a meditation process because they know it reduces stress. And not it's necessarily going to keep people from jumping out of windows, but it has a strength, like that chart showed, of diminishing the negative emotions and making people more peaceful, more content within. Some call it a raging virus. 16.2 million adults in the U.S., that's 6.7% of the adult population, in the past 1 year experienced a major depressive episode. And it's estimated that 15% of the adult population will at some point in their lifetime, have a major depressive episode. 15% of the adult population. An estimated 3.2 million adolescents, 12 to 17, in the U.S. had at least one major depressive episode. 3.2 million. The number represents 13% of the U.S. population, ages 12 to 17, and girls were more likely to have such an experience. Major depressive episode. And the total economic expenditure, can't read it so well, but it's on my computer screen, $210 billion per year. $210 billion per year. That's a lot of dollars. So it's a problem. And it's too much in control. When you have someone that's dear to you and they're going through such an experience or bordering on such an experience, it's painful to deal with. You feel helpless. So the next part of this is like, what triggers it? How does the ball get rolling? The people that study this say it's generally a combination of two things. It's the situation itself that confronts you, and sometimes also it's impressions in the past that resemble that experience and trigger the emotion. Here's an example. Supposing, the Sanskrit phrase is antakarana. Supposing someone had a near-death experience with water. I know somebody that did. And when they, hot summer day, now it's cold, but go to a lake, and supposing in this life or some previous life there was some near-death experience or even a death experience related to drowning in water. So just looking at water, they feel some fear. Supposing somebody had a horrible experience with fire, this life or a previous life, they just see a match, and their body gets gripped with fear. The parasympathetic nervous system kicks in. They don't have any control. They're gripped with fear, and it's just a little match. So this is the impressions within that get triggered by something that just reminds them, externally just reminds them. It doesn't match the reality at all. It just reminds them of their neurological system having this panic attack. And then it just gets triggered again. That's similar. Yeah. So the advice, we'll touch on this again, but the advice is make an effort to see if your emotion matches the circumstance. I'm thinking about the Ukraine because I know devotees in the Ukraine, and it's horrible what's going on. I mean, what you see in the media, and then you hear people that are going through that. It's like, whew. Anyway, when we're standing at the edge of life, or you're moving along your path for the day, and it can be very, very complicated sometimes. Where are those emotions coming from? How to calm them down? A big part of this exercise of dealing with negative emotions is to step out of the emotion by stepping into who you really are. You're the observer of the emotion, but if you identify with the emotion, it can just become bigger and bigger. Here, there's a little experiment that can be done to help people understand. Here's an image of a blank computer screen. There are types of meditation that are like this. I know because I did one when I was in college. The mind is like a blank screen, and then there may be some images that appear in the mind. And if you focus your attention on the image rather than you're the observer of the image, that's you, the observer, and just let it go. There it goes, here comes a thought, an emotion connected to the thought. Wait a while, there goes the thought. It's like a cloud in the sky. And after some while, the cloud is gone and there's another piece of sky up in front of you, and here comes another cloud, and sometimes there's lots of clouds, sometimes it's a clear sky. And in meditation processes, one is the discipline is don't become attached to the thought or the emotion connected to the thought. Rather, you're the observer. So it's like an inner television. The mind is like an inner television, and you can identify what's going on the television. You can cry or laugh or have emotions. Feel sad, feel emotions when it's just a screen. And the mind is like that. It's just like a screen. There's the inner screen is not the transparent depiction of the outer reality. That's part of what heightens negative emotions. And the opposite is what helps one become free from the trap of negative emotions. In other words, you're pointing to self-realization. One who has knowledge of the self doesn't, and its realization of the self, those negative emotions don't play around with the mind because one is not identifying with them. In many cases, with extreme negative emotions, the negative emotions don't match at all the situation, or it's more a perception that triggers that negative emotion. Here's an example. This is a picture of a lady that works with a 1-800 hotline. I know a devotee who volunteered to get trained, and part of his week is so many hours of being responsive to a 1-800 suicide hotline. And so here's an example. This lady gets a phone call from a young woman, and the young woman is contemplating suicide. And she asked what happened, and her boyfriend didn't answer her phone call one time. And so she's trained, and so so tell me, et cetera, et cetera. And it turns out, sure enough, it was an inner impression from some other experience that triggered that negative emotion. And the inner impression that triggered that emotion was she grew up like an abandoned child. Broken family, fear arising from loneliness and abandonment. And that was like, I'm going to be abandoned again, and my boyfriend didn't answer my phone call. Poor boyfriend. And poor girl, because she's trapped inside. That's that nice example of you're the prisoner and you're holding the key. You don't have to be in jail, but you put yourself in jail and you're keeping yourself there. And it's not like, to speak like this is not to condemn the person or call them, some bad name, but it's just the dynamic of, in many cases, how the thing flows. Now, when we did this in China, the next slide is, we could do it here. Maybe we'll do it here. Okay. It's a little exercise. It'll take 3 to 5 minutes. Sometime in your life, there may have been a situation when you felt some negative emotion. And there may have been a circumstance when you felt that negative emotion. It really didn't match. It was disproportionate to the reality of the situation. And if you can think of something and you want to share that with a couple or few people nearby you, you can share with your little story. And I can think of one that happened in my life. I'll share. I had an older brother. He was 9 years older than me. And boys, I think we would wrestle. But he was 9 years older than me, so he'd always win. And one of the things that he did when he would win is he would put a pillow over my head. And as a result, I developed claustrophobia. I mean, circumstance that had nothing to do with that childhood thing. And I get into a confined space. Something kicks in. And I got to get out of that situation. So it's not commensurate with the situation. It's just triggered by some past experience and disproportionate. So that's me. That's an example. I could come up with some other ones. So if you would like, we'll take 3 to 5 minutes. You guys are sitting next to each other. You can talk to each other about this. And ladies back here. It's part of taking a concept and making it, more real and sharing with others. Okay? Hare Krishna.
Yeah, every day in my life, yeah, it's hard to be happy around that stuff, and also in this day and age, we all overreact. Even psychology, we're learning that there's a biological response when you have a danger and threat to your life, and we have that in this age. We have that biological response. If someone cuts in front of us, or they do bad on the test or something, so we all, our bodies overreact. And I haven't read much of it yet, but I know that I need to stop living my life because it shows how self-effective I am. And when I do that, then I'm more okay with everything that happens.
Not like, that's wrong. And then I wanted to never
Not saying
One more minute, please. We're going to have another little breakout session, so you can resume if you want to when we get there. The people that work in this field, they have a term, maybe you've used it also, they call it the avalanche effect or the snowball effect. You've heard that before. In the course of my travels in mountainous areas, I learned something about avalanches. Avalanches happen when there's packed snow, and then on top of the packed snow, there's some fresh, lighter snow. And it's the fresh, lighter snow that rolls down the mountain and causes the avalanche. So when some people are mountaineers, they want to mountain climbing or skiing or whatever, that one of the things they do is they have a gun and they fire a shot that goes towards the top of that mountain. And if there's a likely avalanche going to happen, then the snow starts to come down of its own accord by agitation at the top. And if it doesn't, then it's safer. But when it's not done like that, if some small amount of snow up top starts to roll down and down and down, it gets bigger and bigger and becomes deadly. People can easily be crushed and, overcome by an avalanche. So it's dangerous. So the avalanche effect is mentioned in principle in Bhagavad Gita. Now, this is helping an audience that's not familiar with the Vedic paradigm or Bhagavad Gita paradigm to see the connection between what they practically experience and what Bhagavad Gita says about what they're experiencing. So, in Bhagavad Gita, it speaks of contemplating the objects of a sense. When contemplating the objects of a sense, commonly something happens. You feel something. You feel some emotion connected to the object that you've just contemplated. And it could be, I like it. It could be, I don't like it. It could be neutral. But if it's, I don't like it, then comes, you want to do something about it. Either you want to get one or you want to get rid of it. Attraction and aversion. And if it becomes out of control, so it starts with contemplating objects in the mood of trying to be the enjoyer of objects, which is pretty much what everybody does. Comes some emotion, may come an obsession. And then if the obsession is unfulfilled, then comes some destructive action. It can be self-destructive or destructive to others. Therefore, with this understanding, Bhagavad Gita understanding, one of the recommendations of the persons who work in this field is they try to help people differentiate between what's going on in the mind and the observer of what's going on in the mind. We're the observer, we're not the mind of what's going on in the mind, or the object that you're contemplating. It's being centered upon consciousness. You're with the conscious self within. And once that step is taken, then comes the next step. This is within the field. And that is that thought that you have, which is not you, you redirect the thought. Once you're understanding it's just a thought or an emotion connected to an object, and there's you, the observer, you can redirect the thought. The common expression these days is turning adversity into opportunity. The circumstance is, and it looked like, adversity. But then how to turn the adversity into opportunity. Perhaps you've done this before. Supposing there's a spill moving across the floor. Some water's coming from somewhere, and you don't want the water that's moving across the floor to go towards something you don't want to get wet. So one thing is you could panic. And then another thing you can do, it's very easy, that water that's moving in such and such direction, you just move your hand, give the water a different path to move on, and move it over that way. And then you can, go to wherever the source of water is, but it may take a while to stop the source of water. Just redirect the water flow into a safer direction. And that's this one. Redirect your thoughts. The negative is explode or panic, or in principle live your life where you become numb. And that's, there's medications to help make people numb, so you just don't feel the same things. And it has its place. But the process of yoga and process of meditation is to redirect that same energy, take that same energy, and think of some way to make it positive. And it may be that you just have to put a pause. Maybe you just have to put a pause on that contemplation of the object and redirect your thoughts to something else. Here's in stress management, which is similar to, overcoming negative emotions. There's two general principles. Life throws rocks at you, and it hurts. So that's, the event and your feelings about the event. And then you have some options. One is you can grab that rock and throw it back at where it came from. Take some revenge. Or another is you can just feel bad about, here I go again. The rock, life just hit me with some rocks. And there's some other unhealthy, unwholesome responses that just exacerbate. Another is just pretend it didn't happen. Tuck it under the rug. But then your mind goes back to the hurt and to the rock. So the option that's recommended for stress management is you take the rock, you acknowledge that which happened, which is not nice, and you toss it up in the air, the rock and the emotion. And you go into a reflective space, mode of goodness space, and you consider, what are my options? And your options might be, you know what, I'm not even going to deal with this rock. I'm going to do something that energizes me. I like something. No, it can be an unwholesome, somebody, you have food obsession, just go eat something or drink something, something that's not wholesome, but something that's wholesome. Mantra meditation is one. Some people that doesn't have to wait for a rock to hit them. They just like sitting with a musical instrument and singing and go into that space. And when they go into that space, everything becomes nice. I just had a discussion today with one person. They said gardening is that kind of thing that just, all their cares and stress and just like, it's gone. Because they're very absorbed in artwork. It's different things. It's not an escapism. It's something that it's meaningful for you. You connect with. You get energy and strength. And when you have energy and strength, you can go back to the rock, and then if you need to, if it's important to do that, and consider again, what are my options about that? So it doesn't require an immediate solution, but to connect with what is meaningful. This is the redirect thoughts point. And you can do all those nice things, however, here's a nice verse from Bhagavad Gita. The senses are so strong and impetuous, O Arjuna, that they forcibly carry away the mind, even of a man of discrimination who is endeavoring to control them. The mind is pretty stubborn and rebellious, and sometimes it's too much. Therefore, according to Bhagavad Gita, an additional factor that's essential is purity. And purity has a way to reach a state where there's better purity or more purity. Commonly, and this is now moving into the meditation topic, there's alignment between these three realms. Now, hopefully technology is going to work. There's 3 doors, like deity doors or something, and it's going to represent the 3 doors of body, mind, and heart. So if things work well, the doors are going to open. This is a teenager designed this for me, so... Oh, it doesn't work. Oh, boy. Oh, I know. Here we go. So aligning the body, the mind. Let's see if we can get it to work this way. Yes. So supposing you're going into a king's palace and there's a treasury inside. So the treasure is this pure consciousness, and there's needs is alignment of the body, mind, and the heart. This is part of the meditation process. And on the other side is this place of higher consciousness. And in that state when there's this higher consciousness, knowledge of the self becomes very prominent. And in that knowledge of the self being prominent, there's greater strength and clarity how to respond to a stimulus or a circumstance, that whether pleasant or unpleasant, rather than getting all involved in it, a proper response, an appropriate, suitable response. And then you have freedom. You're able to make choices wisely from that place of higher consciousness. The meditation process has the effect, when done nicely, of carrying you, transporting you through this alignment of the body, the mind, and the heart to that place of higher consciousness. That's what that little presentation is meant to show. And of the processes of meditation, mantra meditation has been demonstrated as being most effective, more effective than the silent meditation or other techniques of meditation. It's using the same theme here as the path of purity. One can become elevated through sound, spiritual sound, sacred sound. It's soul elevating, it's consciousness elevating. It's consciousness is concomitant with the soul, Prabhupada would say. I'll say it again. Consciousness is concomitant with the soul. Okay, what does concomitant mean? They're inseparable. Just like sunlight and sun. They're inseparable. Consciousness and the soul are inseparable. So pure consciousness is concomitant with the soul. And then if you're not in pure consciousness, you need to clean up your consciousness. Make it more pure. And meditation is sound meditation particularly, is very effective in that as a purifying agent. It's not just talking about it or thinking about it, it's made of reaching a state of consciousness or a state of being. And by practice of meditation, mantra meditation, sound meditation in particular, then it has that effect. Here's a verse from the Bhagavatam, first canto Bhagavatam. Simply by giving oral reception to Vedic sounds, the feeling for loving devotional service sprouts up at once to extinguish the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. So there's a sound entering the ear, and if it is spiritual sound, this Bhagavatam is spiritual sound, it has that effect. Now in the 1960s and 1970s, you see from the text below, there was a Swiss engineer and medical doctor. There's his name, Hans Jenny. And he was doing some experiments to see what's the effect of sound on matter. And in the course of his work, his studies, he invented a machine that he called the tonoscope. Tonoscope. An instrument that measures the effect of sound on matter. And you see the text below. He used different mediums: water, sand, dust, liquid, plastic, milk. And those materials were placed on a plate or a membrane, and they're attached to a crystal oscillator, or kind of like, there's three parts. Something that generates a sound, a channel or tube through which the sound was directed, and the medium upon which it was hitting. And when sounds were changed, that medium showed different effects. He found that Vedic sounds, you see up on the upper left, that's a Sri Yantra. And the Sri Yantra, those who are from South India may know what a Sri Yantra is. It's a two-dimensional depiction of something that's spiritual, more than 3 dimensions. And it's depicted in a two-dimensional pattern, a geometric pattern. And the Sri Yantra that was formed by this sound Om being projected through the tonoscope upon the medium, the crystal or the membrane, shows what you see on the right. That's a photograph of particles of powder. I've seen a video of this. The Om, the pattern of powder starts to form in what you see on the screen, which resembles the Sri Yantra. And the Sri Yantra is a depiction of the spiritual realm. Here's a modern drawing of a Sri Yantra. Here's a color depiction of what was shown on the membrane. In other words, not only does sound affect the configuration of matter, but spiritual sound creates a configuration of matter that's of spiritual nature. There's others. I won't go into it too much, but there's lots written about this. A neurologist, as a medical profession, became interested in Sanskrit. When he retired, he went to India, took some of his neurological, technology things, and studied the effects of reciting for some hours each day Sanskrit mantras or texts, and he found that the memory capacity for those who did this regularly increased by 2 or 3 times compared to those that didn't, and their emotional state was also far more stable, just from what he called the Sanskrit effect. Your not just your software, but your hardware changes. Back to that, software, hardware, and operator. And consciousness of the operator is also elevated, but even the hardware changes. The Sanskrit effect. So, lots of research. Harvard Medical School. So many the effects of mantra meditation on relief of distress. So, mantra meditation. That's our topic. And that's the place where we want to go. For those who recognize it, that's Govardhan Hill in the background. Nice painting of a sacred place. And we belong there, and we can go there by consciousness, by this mantra meditation. And that mantra meditation has an effect of neutralizing, diminishing the negative emotions, just like when you turn a light on. Well, most light switches in homes in America have an on and off switch. But there's another kind of switch, a dimmer switch. It goes up and down. So you turn it slowly brighter, 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 and the negative emotions become lesser, lesser, lesser. Matter is still out there. Your observations of matter is still going on. But the perception changes. Because you're seeing that matter in relation to the source of matter, and not in relation to, does it make me happy or sad? And what were my past experiences with this kind of matter or that kind of matter? It's consciousness elevating principle. And that helps one overcome negative emotions and experience an internal happiness from Drishtva Nivartate. Okay, so that's my part for this evening. And there was another interactive session, and I left it. I don't know what happened. So let's see if there's some discussion. This young boy, you're pretty peaceful.
I'm gonna get some forward. Yes, could you come? Actually, we just come.
I couldn't hear.
Yeah.
Actually, we just moved from Frederick.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, you're peaceful anyways. Okay. Anybody have some... We have a lot of... the people over here can't see the people way over there, but there's some people way over there. And you can't see the people way over here.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, thank you for a wonderful class. Maharaj, I had a question about when I read the newspapers and know what is going on around the world right now. It really disturbs a lot of feelings of sadness, and maybe sometimes anger also comes in. And it's not something that I'm directly involved, but still it affects my feelings a lot. So.
Dukhalayama shashvatam. It's not a pleasant place. It's not designed, prisons are not designed as a pleasant place. And we're in a prison, and it's not a pleasant place. So, not like it's okay because it's an unpleasant place. It's okay that it's not Bhaktisiddhanta's language is, this material world is not a fit place for a gentleman or a gentle lady. We don't belong here. So it's not escapism, let me out of here, this place is crazy, but, somewhere I made a wrong turn. And I need to correct that. So you go inside and make the self-correction. You go inside and make the self-correction. The self-correction means the choices, the principles by which I make choices. Now, certainly it's not, the solution isn't just putting the situation under a rug and it doesn't exist. It exists. They acknowledge it. One of the best ways to bring about control of the mind and senses is to acknowledge the platform of trying to be the enjoyer of objects of this world is a fool's proposition. And I'm not going to go there. From Bhagavad Gita, I understand, so let me go somewhere else. Go somewhere else is a place of consciousness. So you by nature, are a servant. We all are servants. All souls are servants of some master. Let my master be the benevolent master. Not persons who have forgotten the benevolent master and are acting like animals. And while I'm serving the benevolent master, what is it that I can do to raise consciousness? I mean, what you're saying, you step out of what you're saying and experiencing as you hearing the news. One is just shut the news down. Then you won't feel those feelings. But that's not then you can do that. Some people do that. But what did Vyasa do? He was Tri Kalagya, and he looked into the future and he saw what you saw. And it was yikes. So what did he do? Let me do something that can elevate consciousness. Being a literary person, he did that. So you're Vyasadeva, what's your gift from Krishna? And you do that. You serve differently than the illusion service. Because the illusion service is I and mine. Misidentification with body, and therefore identification with mine. My country, my people, my religion, consciousness goes down, emotions go down, behaviors go down, and I'm not going down that path. It's not a nice path. Not meant for a gentleman or a gentle lady. So what am I going to do? I'm going to go the consciousness path. And internally and externally live accordingly. So this is this redirecting of the emotion. That one slide.
Yeah.
Don't deny the emotion, but it's you redirect it with higher consciousness. Feel invested in being an instrument of higher consciousness, being an example of it within and being an example of it without, according to your capacity. And we're not so good at it. Okay, whatever good at it you are, you exercise it. Do 5 of those and 10 of those, and then it becomes 20 of those and 30 of those. And then it becomes like it's your life. You just practice at it to your capacity. Connecting with Krishna within and living your life in the world around you. And if you become empowered, you can maybe influence a whole lot of people. And if not, you just do what you do your part. We're little people. We do our little part. And along comes someone that's like Prabhupada, and he can influence millions. And still influencing millions. So let me help him. Let me serve him as a master. Okay?
And, I have one more question, Maharaj. Can I ask one?
Mm-hmm.
So So, as you were presenting in the presentation, you gave an example like how our emotions we have to connect and see from where they are coming. Is that a necessary step all the time, or
It becomes natural. Initially anything is a little awkward and cumbersome and slow, like, learning how to drive a car. When you first started driving a car, did you feel awkward and, like a little petrified? And now you don't even think about it. So when you practice, it's something that you're not accustomed to, you pay more attention to it. But once you pay attention to it, it just becomes quite natural. You just don't go to the illusion side, you stay in the reality side. There's this, knowledge and detachment. That couplet of knowledge and detachment is intrinsic, it's built within the bhakti system. You know the verse, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojataha Janiyati Ashu Vairagyam Jnanam Cha. Vairagya and Jnana are a subset of bhakti. So it becomes as part of your bhakti life. You don't have to mechanically go step by step. It's just there. The problem is bhakti is weak. Our Krishna connection is weak. And so we go through this ignorance and suffering unnecessarily. It's all unnecessary. Doesn't mean that when you become self-realized, that all the badness that's going out there, it's just fine. It doesn't affect me because I'm numb. It's not like that. You try to raise consciousness within yourself and raise consciousness by prescribed means with others, and that's your part. And then you do that with 3 other people, 5 other people, 10 other people, 100 other people, 1,000 other people. You do your consciousness raising activities together. Others? Yeah.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. So, I think with Om mantra that has been tested, Hare Krishna mantra also has been tested with that.
I don't know.
I have another question.
Mm-hmm.
So, the mind is generally dualities, right? Yes or no, it accepts on it. But there are some situations where we have to accept both of them, some other things.
Both of what?
Like something which not only like pleasant things and also negative things at a time.
What?
So
I don't know what you're saying. I hope you know what you're saying, because I don't. Say it differently.
So I don't have an example at this point.
Okay, I don't know what you're saying. So you think about it when you get it, your thoughts clear that I can understand it, then you say it again.
Sure. Thank you.
Anyone back there? All the way in the back. Okay. Ladies, there's about 20 people over here. Man, there's about 20 ladies over here. 15 maybe.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. I hope I can explain this properly. My question is, when someone else is going through some emotions or suffering, and when that is presented to us, say for example someone expressing their emotions to us, myself and my wife, the emotions I experience and my wife experience are totally different. It's an example. So the difference is that she say, for example, is more compassionate and she really feels those experiences, but I don't. So what actually contributes that connecting to the other person's suffering and actually feeling their emotions so we can help the other person, how I can grow into that?
Well, you can get a woman's body and it becomes easier. But it's not that feeling the other person's emotions makes it easier for you to help them. You can understand, we cannot precisely understand another's emotions by feeling some emotion that is our emotion in response to their emotion. And empathy, there's a whole seminar that's being taught, 6-8 part, whatever it is, Empathic Communication. You're familiar with that one, right? Yes? So, empathy is it has 3 parts. This isn't what the Course teaches, this is what I've heard and understood. There's a cognitive element you can understand to some extent. There's a affective, you feel something, and there's a motivational, you want to do something about the experience of another. Cognitive, affective, motivational. So it sounds like the question you're asking is, how can I ramp up the affective part when I feel something, so I can be better instrument in the motivational side, I can be better instrument in doing something. Well, it's not that your wife is better at it than you are, necessarily. Maybe she is, maybe she isn't, maybe sometimes she is, maybe sometimes she gets too emotional, she doesn't even know whether to turn left or right because she's too much caught up in her emotions. Maybe. Sometimes. It's practice of hearing where you're not at the center, ideally Krishna's at the center, and you're hearing from it's a spiritual conception, you're hearing from one of Krishna's, just like her question. When she hears what's going on in the news, she feels something. And it's debilitating. So how do I handle that situation? So there's a cognitive, there's an affective, and a motivational. So you can connect more with our teachings of disciplic succession. Read Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita more carefully, and in a from the heart manner, in addition to the head manner, because what the affective part is largely the feelings. The affective means the feelings of another's, but your wife may not have the same idea that you have about what to do about that feeling, or what is best to be done. So that what's best to be done comes from spiritual awareness. So my recommendation to you is not like work on becoming more feeling centered. You become more Krishna centered. And your relationship with Krishna, as that becomes purer and clearer and unobstructed, then you'll have feelings, and you'll also have intelligence of better what to do for yourself and for others. on a practical side as well as a spiritual side. Practical meaning, a worldly steps that can be taken by this person. I mean, this is a very short this is a whole profession of people, how people who help people who have negative emotions. And some of them are more on the spiritual side, and some of them are more on the mechanistic side, or behavioral side, and all of that. Change this behavior, and that'll affect the emotion side. But it's ultimately resting upon the spiritual prowess, the spiritual Shakti. So that's my recommendation for all of us. For responsive to when your spiritual well-being becomes better, you'll be better. Whether the feelings that you feel are like what your wife feels or not, or even and the amplitude of those feelings that you're feeling are match what your wife is feeling, and then you'll be better at it. It's your Krishna consciousness, and the affective and the cognitive parts will become sharper and clearer and more aligned with Krishna. And Krishna will give you the intelligence how to live your life and to speak appropriately. That's going to lift. Devotee care is a big topic, and as turmoil in the world becomes wilder, it's a growing topic. As clinical disorders become more prominent, becomes, so it's called in spiritual circles, it's called pastoral care, pastoral counseling. It's what pastors or ministers or people, that leaders of churches and communities have to have some skills. How to give care to people. And sometimes to give care to people is not necessarily solving their problem, but just being there to let them know that you care. Sometimes people just need that reassurance. So, that comes from experience. And there are courses, and one course is Kruna Care. And her business is not teaching how to feel more like your wife feels. And then you'll be a better caregiver. There's principles in that field that you can learn. Sign up. Okay. Yeah, up here. Okay, go ahead.
There is research about the effects of Hare Krishna mantra on the brain.
Say it again.
Like Prabhu's question.
His question specifically was a tonoscope question.
Oh, okay.
When you send Om through that tube and it hits the membrane, it shows something. What happens when you send the Hare Krishna mantra through that tube? What does it show in the membrane? That's his question. And I said, I don't know. But there's other experiments with Mahamantra. Okay. Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I came across someone about a couple of months ago, and he's a young boy. Basically, when they go through this negative emotion.
You speak really fast. You pause, and then you fit like 5 words in 3 seconds. So could you go a little slower? Be kind to person. Try.
Yeah, this one. So he has a tendency to pick something and worry about it.
Yes, there's a tendency.
Yeah, and let us say we take care of that tendency, that particular worry. Then he has a tendency to pick next one and then worry about it. And then if he give the answers how that's okay.
I got it.
Like that. But parallelly, a good thing is he started chanting and reading Prabhupada books.
This is a person you know.
Yeah,
Okay.
only a couple of months. So that is helping in terms of strengthening how he handles these things. But I wanted to take your guidance. Anything else we could help him?
That's what I just did. Here's an advertisement. Memorial Day weekend, there's going to be an event at the Potomac Temple, and I'm going to be speaking about this topic, and Mahatma Prabhu is going to be speaking about this topic exclusively. The subtopics are listed, and you're all invited. And then you know, I know what's going to happen. It'll be an avalanche of the questions like you're asking, this situation, that situation, and you know he Mahatma teaches more by workshops or breakout sessions than I just did, but there'll be a lot of that. It's a lot of application-oriented type of interaction, which is what you're asking. So, since I don't know the person, and since we have limited time, but so instead I'm taking the opportunity to say, you and others that have an interest in this topic, please attend. And there'll be ample opportunity. He has a few books that are written on this topic, dealing with the subtle factors that are moving the mind, emotions, and rule our lives, and how to get a handle on that. Without knowing the person, it's really hard to say. It's just too wide open. It's like a football field, and go run with the football on the football field. Too broad. Okay, did you get your question sorted out? Okay. Okay, we're done. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Oh, wait a minute. Somebody's got their hand up in the back row.
Namaskar, Guruji.
Hare Krishna.
Is there any benefit of Shri Mantra, like putting it in the home? Will it be any
Is there a
advantage?
benefit?
Yeah, like positive energy or something like that. I would like to know more about the Shri Mantra.
Well, it's a Sri Yantra.
Yantra, yeah. So.
Sri Yantra, and it's a depiction of the spiritual world. It's a two-dimensional. What it is, the person in front of you keeps moving his head. Thank you. Okay. It's a two-dimensional depiction of something that's of spiritual dimension or spiritual reality. It's placing in a two-dimensional picture something that has spiritual reality. That's what a yantra is.
Okay.
And it's used, it's part, in some practices, it's used in worship. Worship is generally done through mantra, and there's commonly also a deity, not always, commonly a deity. So mantra, deity, and yantra. Yantra is depicting the abode of that deity, like in the Shringa Yantra, for example. or there's certain Gayatri mantras, they have their yantras. It's depicting the spiritual realm in a two-dimensional pattern. That's what a yantra is.
Okay.
So it's not the sound is sufficient. This little experiment done by this researcher was the effect of sound on matter. So the conclusion is sound effects matter. So the sound that you hear is important. And if that sound is spiritual sound, then the configuration of the matter within the body and within the place where you live becomes spiritualized. That's the application of this.
Okay. Thank you.
Have you seen photographs of the deity in Mayapur, of the deity of Lord Nrsingadev?
No.
You know who Lord Nrsingadev is? Lord Nrsingadev, half man, half lion, protected Prahlad. Prahlad Nrsinga, you don't know?
No.
Okay.
I'm not there.
Someone that knows, he will show you a photograph of the Nrsinga deity in Mayapur. It's a deity. It's a form of Vishnu, Lord Nrsingadev. And in the front of the deity, there's two brass plates. They're Nrsinga yantras. It's used in the worship. The Nrsinga yantra is depicting the abode of Lord Nrsingadev in the spiritual world in a two-dimensional design. And there's Sanskrit letters and so forth embedded within that yantra. And it's part of, they're utilized, they're vibrated by mantra. And the yantra is depicting what the mantra says in a two-dimensional depiction.
Okay.
It's used in worship. It shows the abode of whomever. Okay?
Okay, yeah. Thank you. Thank you,
Okay.
Guruji.
Oh, there's online questions? Oh, I'm sorry.
This question is from Rishabdev Prabhu. He says, this question's from Bhakta Shan, actually. You allowed me to serve you personally and have known His Grace Murari Chaitanya Prabhu and helped him close his house upon his mother's passing. He's just showing appreciation.
Okay.
And then this is from Rishabdev Prabhu. I realize our focus should continue to be preaching. Could you speak on historical stances previous Vaishnavas have taken during World War II? How did they feel about Adolf Hitler and what did they do?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know that history. You could ask somebody that knows more history than me. I don't know. Okay, thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.